Today's bike check, we're checking out my brand new 2019 Nukeproof Mega 290. Of course, this bike runs on massive 29-inch wheels, but let's start at the heart of the bike first. So this is a size XL. Everyone knows I'm fairly tall, about 6'3½", nearly 6'4", and this is one of the biggest out-of-the-box size XL frames you can get. Now you might have noticed it's quite skinny. That's because it's actually an aluminium frame. It's triple butted and it's hydroformed. So not like the 275 that Neil has got. He's got the carbon version of this bike with the smaller wheels. I've actually opted to go for this bike because I prefer, simply put, I prefer the way the bigger wheels handle. Now it runs 150mm travel out back on the frame. It's got a 66-degree head angle up front and a 75.5-degree seat angle, so it's pretty climb friendly, and it's got nice roomy geometry. Out back it's got a 450mm chainstay, so it's quite long, and I am a fan of long chainstays, but it has meant I've had to alter a few things to get the setup exactly how I want it on the bike. Now in combination with those huge 450mm chainstays is a massive front end on it. It's extremely long. So the reach on this for an XL is 515mm. Just to put that into perspective, my previous bike, the Scott bike I rode last year on the channel, that was 505mm, and that was already one of the longest bikes out there. And the prior bike I had to that, my Canyon Spectral, that was just 480 in the size XL. So this really is giant as far as big bikes go. So if you're a tall rider like myself, this could be a great option for you. So the last frame I had actually had a RockShox Super Deluxe rear shock on there, and it's slightly different to this current shock here, which of course is the Foxflow X2. So it's quite an advanced shock. On the shock you've got the air pressure settings, you've got high and low speed rebound and high and low speed compression, as well as a climb switch. There's a lot of adjustment you can do to this, and you can also adjust the air volume internally. Now it's a 55mm stroke shock and it's 210mm eye to eye, in case you wanted to fit one of those yourself. And as I say, on the previous bike I also chose to run the RockShox shock with a load of volume spacers, and it's just my preference. I really like a progressive feeling back end on a bike, and of course it's no different with the Fox suspension. So there are a lot of different suspension designs out there on the market, including single pivots, 4 bars, single pivot linkage activated rear ends, and I really love the fact this is such a simple back end because it's really refined and it works well. It's a classic 4 bar, which means it's got a nice low pivot at the front there. You've got the chainstay pivot, which used to be known as the Horst link on there, and of course you've got the driver there for the shock. It's a really supple feeling back end. It's incredibly active under pedaling, under braking. It just works really well, and obviously it gives you a lot of scope to set the bike up to suit what you want to do. Now this particular back end is Boost 148 spaced on here, and again just to emphasise the fact it's a nice long chainstay. Now, short chainstays do feel really good on bikes. It does mean you can pop the front end up, you can manual and stuff, but also when it comes to like a nice long rangy bike, actually a longer chainstay is better because it puts your weight more evenly distributed between the two wheels. It actually gives you better traction, I find, climbing and descending. But as a result of that, I have had to change the front end to get it the way I like it. So let's go and have a look at the cockpit now. Now as standard, the bike does come with a full width handlebar, but it tends to come with a 30mm rise Nukeproof bar on there, and also comes with a 50mm stem. Now whilst they do feel great on the bike and they do totally suit that size bike, I just completely picky about what I like the bike to feel like. I've always loved a really tall front end on a bike regardless of the size wheels. It's just the way I like the bikes to feel, and because this bike is so long I can get away with having a really high front end, which makes it feel really lively, but I still get the benefit of that long wheelbase. So I've shortened the stem. I've put a 35mm on here, so it's one of those new Horizon stems, and I've obviously gone for that bronzy copper finish just because it looks really nice. If I'm being shallow about things with the paint job of the bike, it just looks great on there. And I've gone for the Sam Hill edition of the bar, and that's in a full 38mm rise, so it's a really tall front end. And I've also got 3 spacers. I've got 2 of the bigger ones and 1 of the smaller 5mm spacers underneath that stem to get everything the way I like it. Of course, climbing is not affected because that front end is so long and there's so much weight on the front end that you still have plenty of traction. I don't have to try hard to keep the front wheel on the ground, and of course it means when it starts going down again, it's really fun to sort of pop up the front end, manualing, bit of jumping, bit of messing around. It just feels really good on the trail. Of course, the bar is full 800mm width. I always run that on my bikes. I like them nice and wide. And the grips on here, I've got the GD1 model of the Ergon grip. That's the downhill one. It actually has a slight profile that tapers. It's shallower to the inside and bigger on the outside. So it's really supportive on the outside edge of your hand. Now, I do use it in two different diameters. They do use it in a thin and they do use it in a slightly thicker. I actually prefer the thicker grip, but in winter I actually prefer running the slightly thinner one because of course you end up wearing slightly bulkier gloves and just to give a bit more feel on the bars. And again, I do tend to change that around for different times of year, but the thicker one is my go-to grip. Now you might notice I run my brake levers quite high. They're not as flat as Rob Warner's bike. If you go back to that gamer bike we released just before Christmas there, his brake levers are nearly horizontal, and that's because he comes from a motorcycle trials world. And I actually took a tip from him years ago to bring my brake levers up because I was suffering from arm pain on long descents, and it makes a massive difference. Basically just means you don't have to move around too much on the bike and you've always got the brake levers where you want them. I do run them quite inboard, but because these are Shimano XTs, actually the lever blade itself is quite small, so I actually have to run them nearer the grip than I probably would usually. But also there's a slight illusion here. These grips are 5 inches long, so they're quite a lot longer than standard mountain bike handlebar grips. It does mean they're actually a bit more inboard than they do look. Tidying up the rest of the cockpit here, I've got my trusty GMBN top cap, and I've also got some of the orange grip tape on my Crankbrothers Highline dropper post remote. It's just a nice little touch. Of course, normally most people prefer black, but just because I've got some orange highlights on the bike, it just looks pretty cool. And of course, everyone knows me, I love my cable ties. For once, they're actually doing a job they're supposed to be doing, they're tying cables together and stop them rattling around too much. Now up front of the bike here, it's running a Fox 36 fork with the Grip 2 damper. This is the really advanced top end model. So that means it's got 2 lots of compression damping and 2 lots of rebound damping, high and low speed for everything. So it's super adjustable, it's super refined, and it's probably the most controlled fork I've ridden in some time. It's absolutely fantastic. So at present I'm running it with about 25% sag, slightly on the firmer side for usual, and it's got 160mm travel. Now the wheels on the bike are not the stock wheels. It actually comes with a DT Swiss E1700s, but they've actually been poached off my bike to be used on another video on GMBN. So for the moment, I've actually done a bit better out of this. I've got slightly lighter wheels on here. So these are the XM 1501s. So they're also DT Swiss. They're very similar wheels, in fact. They're just slightly lighter. Now they've also got the ratchet drive hub on the rear, which is their high-end, really, really nice internal hub. And they've got the 30mm rim option. Naturally, I've got these set up tubeless. I've got a Continental sealant in there, Continental tyres front and rear. I've got the Trail King 2.4s with that Apex casing on them. So it's a really grippy tyre, but they roll fairly fast as well. So they're pretty good in all conditions. Along with that Fox fork, you might have noticed I've got a mudguard on the front. This particular one is a mud hugger who support us here at GMBN, and of course had to get the colour coordinated graphics just to match in with the bike. And the last thing you might notice, I've got a whopping great 203mm disc rotor on the front. Of course, it's a Shimano XT caliper with the heat fin brake pads. So like I said, out back is the same XM 1501 wheel set with that ratchet drive hub. That's really the key in the DT range because they do have 2 different internals. You've got the Classic, which has those regular pulls that you get on traditional style hubs, and then you get the ratchet drive, which is super reliable, really fast, positive engagement, and they're an absolute delight to work on for servicing. Absolutely brilliant hubs. Again, the tyre out back, Continental Trail King 2.4. I'd actually clip down the centre tread just to make it roll that bit quicker. But actually at this time of year locally it's pretty muddy out, so I am looking at swapping both of these out for a set of the DeBaron tyres, so slightly better in the looser conditions. The only thing with those tyres for my local trails is they do roll a little bit slower, so I might end up running that front tyre on the back and putting the Baron up front there just for that bit more control in the real wet, muddy conditions. It's 11 speed rather than 12 speed, which I don't think is much of a problem, but there are a few little things that I might want to change on here. Now, it's got an XT transmission, so there's an XT shifter up on the bars, XT derailleur here, so Shadow Plus with the clutch on there, and it's an 1146 cassette, so it's quite a big climbing gear. Of course, not as big as the 50 tooth that you get on the SRAM Eagle. However, on the SRAM Eagle, I was running a 34 up front, and it's got a 32 here on these XT cranks. Now, there's nothing wrong with that gearing, it's low enough to get up everything I need to, but what I have noticed is I spend a lot of time down the high end of the block, which means there's a lot more chain flap going on. So I am looking at considering taking up to 34 tooth chainring on the front and maybe opting out on a cassette on the rear to see if I can get a slightly bigger top sprocket on there, but that's something I'm going to play with. And just another thing as well, it's got 170mm cranks, which to be honest, it's a great choice for a bike like this because it's quite low and you do ground out the pedals, but I do prefer a 175 crank, so I'm going to look at changing that out for a 175. Finishing kit on the bike includes an Ergon SME3 saddle on here. That's my preferred current choice in the range, although Neil keeps telling me to switch out for one of the newer ones that he insists is a lot comfier. Seatpost is a Crankbrothers Highline with a 170 drop, so that's a super tall drop. That is full extension for me. As you can see, the collar is nearly in the frame, so I love the fact that I get a maximum drop possible. You might notice I'm also running a set of the bigger Crankbrothers Stamp flat pedals. My normal choice of pedals is actually the mallet clipless pedal, but I've really been enjoying running flats recently. And you might have noticed I'm running a tube strap down here as well with an inner tube, a CO2 cartridge on here and a couple of park tyre levers. Of course, this one is by Lowry, a British design here, and it just helps you get back on the trail as soon as you get a puncture. As the bike is absolutely fantastic for the stuff I love to ride, but I do plan on doing some changes to it over the year over on GMBN Tech. I'm going to be doing some stuff to the shock, I'm going to be doing some stuff with wheels and all sorts of other little hop-ups just to alter the way the bike rides and just perfect it for the stuff that I like to do. So be sure to check out GMBN Tech for that. For a couple more videos along these lines, click down here if you want to see me set this bike up out on the trail, taking it for its first sort of maiden voyage and just get the suspension dialed in. And click over here if you want to see all the other pro bike checks we've done on GMBN Tech over the last year. As always, give us a huge thumbs up if you love the channel and don't forget to click that subscribe button.